Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are very excited to be here today and release our 2023 State of Hispanic Homeownership Report. Thank you. So I thought that I would start by just walking through some of our key takeaways, and then we'll launch into our panel discussion. So if you want to start the deck here, I know most of you were able to get a copy of the report when you came in. You also have a QR code where you can download the digital version. So last year, the Hispanic homeownership rate reached nearly 50%, which is a key milestone. It's a key milestone for a couple of reasons. One, our sister organization, the Hispanic Wealth Project, has set the goal to triple Latino household wealth, and as a part of that goal to reach a 50% homeownership rate. So we're really excited that we're almost there. We also have nearly rebounded to our pre-crisis peak. So right before the 2008 housing crisis, we were at 49.7% homeownership rate. Obviously, after the crisis, we had a lot of folks lose their homes, and so this is a key milestone in the sense that we're back there, but also in a new underwriting and lending environment that's much more sustainable. Last year was also the largest single-year gain of Hispanic households in almost 20 years. So we added a net gain of 377,000 Latino owner households, the largest single-year gain since 2005. And this was against the backdrop of one of the most unaffordable housing markets that we've seen in a generation. So that was a really big deal. Additionally, we know that Latinos are young, and one of the findings of the report was that not only are Latinos younger than the general population, they're the youngest racial or ethnic demographic, over 10 years younger than non-Latinos. Latinos also buy houses younger. So the largest, Hispanics have the largest share of home buyers under the age of 25, and as a part of our practitioner study, our agents have been telling us that the majority of their buyers are between 25 and 35. So we know that not only are Latinos young and they're aging into their prime home buying years, but they're buying houses younger than non-Hispanics. So interest rates were the largest barrier to advancing homeownership last year. We know that in October of 2023, the average 30-year fixed rate reached a high of 7.79%. As a part of our qualitative study, interest rates were the number one thing that people wanted to speak about because it just made qualifying for a mortgage more difficult. And we saw that interest rates not only were the highest that it's been in a really long time, but also that they were climbing faster than ever before. So someone that qualified 1 month didn't qualify the next month, which created a lot of uncertainty and distress in home buying. So one of the things that interest rates did do was slow down home price appreciation, but prices remain unaffordable. We partnered with Realtor.com to look at the share of houses that were under different price points. In 2023, only 13.8% of homes on the market were priced under $200,000, compared to almost 40% in 2016. And on the next slide, you can kind of see the inversion of what those price points looked like in just a 7-year period. So that was pretty substantial. But despite these barriers, Hispanic homebuyers remained resilient. We found that Latinos were willing to find a way. That's why we saw the largest increase of owner households in almost 20 years, despite the fact that affordability challenges were particularly tough. We know that Latinos were more likely to take on co-borrowers as other demographic groups, were willing to move to lower cost areas, and buyers agents played a really big role in ensuring that Latinos had access to localized programs. We heard a lot that builders were offering buy-down programs for rates. There were a lot of down payment assistance programs and grant programs, and a lot of the agents that we interviewed discussed how they were able to get folks into homes by utilizing those programs. So those are our top takeaways. So I'm excited to talk to our esteemed panel here and dive into this a little bit deeper. So Chris, I'm going to start with you. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies was one of the first think tanks to put demographic data together with homeownership trends. It actually helped inspire this report. So how do our report findings align with the Harvard Joint Center report?
Great, and it's great to be here. I'm really, really impressed at the energy you all bring early in the morning. You don't have to have a coffee table. You just have music and dancing, and I'm glad you didn't ask me to dance out.
No dancing for us.
Congratulate you on a really terrific report. I know from my center puts out reports like this, how much work is involved in it, and I think you did a great job telling the data story, and I love the fact that you included the voices of realtors and professionals in there to tell the story. Really, really great report, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
It very much echoes our reports. I mean, there are a couple of key findings. You noted that we specialize in demographic analysis. Gary pointed out the Urban Institute's forecasts. I love the Urban Institute. We're about to come out with our updated our household forecast too. And what we've been pointing to for a long time is that immigrants, Latinos drive household growth in the U.S. Gary quoted 70%. It's more than the majority of households are coming from Latinos. And it's true of all households, and it's true of homeowners. So I think that point of your report, just the importance of the Hispanic market to overall housing demand, really echoes. And the fact that homeownership rate is rising is great, but it's still an enormous gap between the whites and Latinos. And so I think there's a lot of work left to be done. But in many respects, I think there's a lot of strong echoes there. The other thing I would point to, too, is the challenge of affordability. Our State of the Nation's housing report last year just documented how much that rise in interest rates pushed out millions of renters, including millions of Hispanics, from the ability to buy. So, definitely.
As a follow-up here, so our report talks about demographics unique to the Hispanic community, living in multi-generational households, utilizing co-borrowers. What do you think the implication of these factors are on practices and policy in the industry?
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting finding in the report. So Latinos the 31%, I believe you reported, of Latino households are in multi-generational households, almost twice the share for non-Hispanic whites. And that's reflected then in a very high share of co-borrowers, family groupings buying homes, which has been an important way to get over the hump on qualifying for a mortgage, given the challenges they're seeing. And your report really pointed out the fact that it's not just groups of people buying a house together, but it's also mom and dad helping to make that loan possible. So the kind of family connections are really important for Latinos. And I think that for the lending industry, being sensitive to how do we underwrite loans where you have multiple borrowers on underwriting a loan are important. And for home builders is how do we think about housing that's going to be suitable for multiple households living together. So I think given the size of this market, I think both for lenders and builders alike, that's really important lessons.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you mentioned too. As a part of our qualitative study, a lot of the practitioners that talked about co-borrowers that were actually living in the household together often talked about their build environment allowed for that. So for example, in Denver, they often have basement units that have full kitchens, and so they're able to have multiple families living there. So that's a really good point. Okay, Maria, I'm gonna go to you next. Looking at these trends from a business perspective, we're talking growths, profits, strategy. How do you take the information and the trends in this report and apply it to your business strategy?
Again, congratulations on the report, the 14th year. It's really interesting too to see the report year after year for 14 years and see how it's evolved. And it's still really a manual for business development and strategy. A couple takeaways that I took from this. I'd say, being representing a lender, a lot of people ask, well, what are the products? What are the programs that you have to offer? And we will definitely get to that. But it's really, what I took away from this is just, it's an ecosystem of things that have to happen in way before a borrower even sits at the table in front of a loan officer. There's so many things that have to happen. And so, a couple things. One is I saw that these numbers continue to grow, like you said, in the most difficult markets. When that's happening, that's not a fluke. And when it's happening 10 years in a row, that it's the only segment that keeps growing in these difficult times, that's when you need a comprehensive strategy. And when I mean comprehensive strategy, that's not taking a product flyer and translating that into Spanish. It's not that language isn't important, because it is important, but that's not a strategy. Now it's so great to come to a conference and to see so many colleagues of mine that are in a position to drive this business. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, there's a few of us. So you need a comprehensive strategy, sales, operations, communication, marketing. That's what I mean by comprehensive. The other thing is that businesses can't hide, if you will, from it, because you see it's not just Florida, California, Illinois now. You see these hyper-growth markets occurring in Pennsylvania. Last year, I think it was Memphis, Tennessee was one of the hot markets. So we have you surrounded. It's in every market in the U.S. that we see the growth happening. We are young. Maybe not me anymore personally, but we are a young demographic, which is wonderful from a business growth perspective. But one thing that I see that the industry needs to address really quickly is, the average age of a Latino is 30. Okay, the average age of a loan officer in the U.S. is upwards of 55. Okay, so that there's not only a cultural gap, there's a generational gap. And if we don't have people in the industry reflective of our culture, of our age, there's going to be some challenges there. So there's a great opportunity, though. We're continuously enthusiastic about home ownership. We're not enthusiastic about the process, right? In the report we saw, what were the three major feelings around this? Was like stress, anxiety, depression? But it was, we have to do a better job in making the process easier for our people. Inventory, big issue. In the sessions the last couple of days, it was great to hear from nonprofits, from organizations that, maybe churches, that are reacting to the change in, since COVID, the change of people going to church, so now they're repurposing the properties. That's really important and great to see. So again, programs are very important, and we'll talk about that later, but I just wanted to touch on a few things about some of the things touching that before we even talk about, lending.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So Melody, at the State of the Union last week, President Biden spoke about his commitments to making homeownership more affordable, including tax credits, lowering mortgage costs, developing housing stock. What additional information can you share with us? Did anything in our report resonate with you and the initiatives that you're pursuing?
Yeah, thanks. Hello?
Oh.
Hello, buenos dias. There we are.
There we go.
Buenos dias, colegas. Thank you so much for waking up early to be here with us, and thanks so much to Jamie, to NAREP, to Gary, Kat, everybody that helped make this event possible. I grew up as a little girl in Chula Vista, California. I love that. I never imagined that I would work in a position where White House was in my title, right? And I think one of the things that for me has been exciting along my professional journey, coming out here to grad school and then falling in love with the city and the different job opportunities here, is that there's so much opportunity to do good in this city. I had the chance to work on the Biden-Harris transition team, and having served in the Obama administration before, I thought, well, if I don't serve second term, I had a moment. But to work on transition, I'd never done that before. I thought that was really exciting to see what that was like. And the team basically was tasked with helping prepare the incoming administration for its first 100 days. And when I saw how intentionally equity was embedded into the work, I got excited and energized and said, okay, I need to actually try to come back in the second administration. And now I serve as executive director of the House Hispanic Initiative, where, since day one, I've seen how President Biden issued executive orders on equity. So State of the Union is kind of the most recent speech, but really there's been a whole thread of a number of executive orders and actions that have really called on a government-wide approach to advancing equity. And in terms of our office's lane, we're housed out of the U.S. Department of Education. So we work under the leadership of Secretary Miguel Cardona, who I absolutely love as a leader. He's one of a historic 4 Latinos leading a cabinet agency. And one of the things that's exciting about our executive order for our office is that we're tasked with moving 12 cradle-to-career policy goals. Among that is also thinking about the systemic barriers that impact our Latino community's ability to succeed, whether it's environmental justice, housing justice, transportation justice. The office scope was expanded by President Biden, so not only do we focus on education, but now in this administration we have a runway to play with economic opportunity and equity in really deep and meaningful ways. So for me, with the report, I was really excited to see how you too wove education and economic opportunity, both in terms of data and also the qualitative spirit of quotes and experiences that are raised in the report. I think, for example, some of the things that really stood out to me are some of the data points that just talk about a theme that I think is really critical for us to be focused on, which is that if we want to build a generation of investors, we have to invest in their education, right? And that is a point that I think this report helps resonate. For example, to pull out, I think one of the things we've said is that educational attainment is on the rise among the Latino community. 7.6 million Latinos as of 2022, age 25 or older, have a bachelor's degree or higher, which is great. Over the last 10 years, the number of Latinos with bachelor degrees has doubled, and that's critical and ties to home ownership, because we then get to see from the Federal Reserve study how Latino households headed by someone with a college degree have a median net worth of $229,000, and that is 5 times higher than Latino households that don't have a college degree. And at the U.S. Department of Education, one of the things that happened this week, actually just yesterday, is that we released our Department of Education budget. And you'll see right now, this is a great time to be in Washington, D.C., because we're putting out a lot of content this week. We have, of course, the State of the Union that has a number of different fact sheets that get into the weeds on what's being done on housing, as well as a number of other priorities. And you'll also see agencies like mine, the Department of Education, the Housing and Urban Development Department, and others that have also now shared their perspectives on the President's budget proposal that was just delivered to Congress. And I think that is critical for NAHREP and its members to be familiar with. And a lot of these products, some of them, especially the agency documents, can be a little more user-friendly to read than the whole budget package. But take a look at the White House fact sheets, these agency budget documents and press releases, because your voices are needed now to talk to Congress to make sure that we can continue to drive the investments and especially the work to close historic equity gaps, and never underestimate the power of your voice. I used to work on the Hill, and when we would make vote recommendations to then Congressman Javier Becerra, who I worked for, he would ask, what are the constituents saying? So just as much as we would say what the news was, what the policy was, what the stats were, what large organizations were saying, we would intentionally look at what was being written, what the calls were that were coming in. So please, please join us in this work, because we know that it takes us working together to really empower our community.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And we do have our policy priorities that we release as a part of this report. And a few hundred of us will be hitting the Hill on Thursday to share it with their congressional offices. All right, Maria, I'm going to come back to you really quickly here, and I'd be interested to know how much of an influence, you mentioned that you were going to talk about products, how much of an influence does the data play when it comes to product development?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely critical. So we, the housing supply, right? That was an issue. So you need to get right to the source, right? So we need to work with minority developers. So Wells Fargo had a grant last year to minority developers and nonprofits to make sure that they are getting that, they are working in the community and they're providing that support that's so needed. Also, I mentioned about being younger and having people that reflect us in the industry. It's really important to foster that pipeline of talent. So we're partnering with the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association, to get more people into the industry, as well as creating specific roles that serve our underrepresented communities. I don't like the term underserved, but underrepresented communities, which is super important too. Not that it rests on their shoulders alone, but they're specialists. They're the subject matter experts in the field. So all that is important, and obviously the availability of affordable products and programs. We're all constantly looking at refreshing and revising our products and programs based on the data.
That's wonderful. I like that. Underrepresented.
Underrepresented.
I'll start using that.
Yeah. Underserved.
All right, Chris. So in addition to your role at the Harvard Joint Center, you also serve on the board at Freddie Mac, meaning you have a unique vantage point. So you can look at the data both from an academic perspective, but also from a practitioner point of view. To the extent that you can share, what kinds of conversations are happening surrounding the Hispanic market? Gary mentioned earlier, one of our goals was to utilize these as practical conversations surrounding business strategy. Is that happening, or are we still wowed by the data?
Oh, it's absolutely happening. You know, and the GSEs have long been subject to the housing goals. A percentage of their lending has to go to certain areas and certain groups. They've also been subject to duty to serve, to expand lending in manufactured housing in rural areas and to affordable housing. Yeah. And under the Biden administration, there's been added an equitable housing finance plan as well to put much more emphasis on products and services to help close racial gaps in housing. And so it's very much an active conversation at the enterprises. And what I would say is it really infiltrates three different domains that are all important. We've talked about products. And so what loan products do you have that are going to be able to reach people who may have lower credit scores, less wealth, less income, more informational gaps to overcome? Yeah. The other part is processes. What are your processes for underwriting loans, and how does your credit box established? We're looking at all these things at Freddie. And the last I would say is also underappreciated is the channels. It's like, how are you connecting with borrowers, and who is your lender network? And I think that's something that I would say at Freddie Mac has become much more front and center too, is to say, you know, we can have products and we can have processes, but if we don't have a way to reach those folks, we're not going to get them in the door. So I think I'm seeing, from where I sit in the board, work happening in all those domains. One I'll point out that was in your policy proposals that is part of our equitable housing finance plan has to do with special purpose credit programs. Mm-hmm. And your policy proposal points both to the fact that these are incredibly important, a chance for lenders to create programs aimed specifically at closing racial gaps, but they face problems in terms of actually being rolled out and to who's eligible and how big they are and how targeted they are and how cumbersome they are to use. Yeah. We hear you. I think that's something that, you know, Freddie rolled one out last year, and learning from that process and going to expand it as well to try to make it easier to use and to reach a bigger audience. But that ability to target particularly racial groups that have been underserved, underrepresented, sorry, to correct my language, is an important piece of that. So that's one product that I would point out.
Yeah. I think later we're going to be talking about the special purpose credit, because it's not for, you know, practitioners. You don't call it that in the market. Like, as industry professionals, we do, but lenders rarely, you know, call it that. It's under some other name. But we'll talk about those real important. Special purpose credit is basically a program designed specifically for the needs that we're talking about here. So it's great that you all have offered several sessions on the importance of special purpose credit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The language that we use when we're labeling this terminology is not necessarily something that everybody has been accustomed to. So we do have a session later today that'll dive deeper into these programs. Okay, Melody, so we've talked a lot about how Latinos are young. That's something that we're very proud of, including Maria. We note that young people today are facing challenges. Student loan debt, rent prices are really high. It's pushing homeownership out of reach for many young people, including young Latinos. How is the administration, or how is your initiative planning to support young Latinos as we're aging into our prime home buying years?
Yeah, great question. And yes, we are all young at heart. Age is sometimes a number, but I think, this is why I kind of opened starting about this important of investing in education now is going to build that generation of investors in the future, right? And I think President Biden and Vice President Harris very much believe that everyone deserves to live in a safe and affordable home. One of the things I'm proud of is being part of a community. We call ourselves Latinos 46. There's a network of Latino appointees serving the presidential administration of the 46th president. And if we took a photo during Hispanic Heritage Month that I love to show, and it just shows the volume of people from our community that are in so many different agencies. And I'm glad here at this event we've got representatives from the White House, Housing and Urban Development, Small Business Administration. But across the board, there are people that are really trying to identify what are these systemic barriers that we may be able to try to help dismantle and pull down. So I think some of the things that are interesting to note are that, of course, there's more housing units under construction right now, but still there's more work to do. One of the things President Biden called on the State of the Union this week is for Congress to lower costs by providing a $10,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers and people who sell starter homes. The budget that was just announced also would launch this first generation down payment assistance program to provide $10 billion for a program to target down payment assistance to help first-time home buyers whose parents do not own a home and are at or below 120% of the area median income. And this would help about 400,000 eligible home borrowers. So that's just one example. And then over at the Department of Education, we're doing all that we can as well. One of Secretary Cardona's big priorities, called Raise the Bar, Lead the World, that's focused on college affordability and accessibility, is one pillar of that, which we know is critical. And we've been working to deliver more student loan relief than any administration in history, canceling student loan debt. I know people, we can talk about the almost 4 million people who've been able to receive benefits from this relief. But just a real story is I've met a Latina in Minnesota who got $265,000 of her law school loans canceled through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. I know a couple here in Maryland that works in the nonprofit sector. They both worked in public service, so we're also able to get their student loans forgiven. I'm meeting people across the country who, because of this loan cancellation, now can talk about buying homes and are doing so because of some of these actions. So you might not have necessarily thought of the Department of Ed necessarily in the housing space, but we are very much thinking about what's our role in building generational wealth, both in terms of educating students and giving them the highest quality education and systems possible, but also on the back end, doing all that we can to deliver the student loan relief and also even lower through the income-driven repayment plan, the new program called the SAVE Plan, opportunities for those borrowers that are left with some debt to hopefully have lower monthly payments that could make things like purchasing homes, more of a realistic possibility for them.
Thank you so much.
I was going to say, with you said first generational, which is I think really important because we talk about first-time home buyers a lot, but this generation is coming into home ownership where our parents were the immigrants, so many of us are that first generation, and so that's really important. And then also the youth being vastly millennial. A lot of companies talk about their millennial strategies, but they don't have a Hispanic strategy. And you can't have one without the other, right? So that's really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. All right, Chris, we are nearing the end of our time here. Any final words you'd like to share with us?
No, I think I just want to applaud the report highlighting the importance of the Latino market for the housing market, for the homeowner market. I think I applaud the Biden administration for their proposals, particularly around down payment assistance when house price to income ratios are approaching 5. Not having that savings is a huge barrier, and I think the kind of informational barriers, so you referenced the fact that people have anxiety, stress, disappointment, a lack of trust. So investing in communities that are supporting home buyers to give them that information and that access is critically important. So the work you all do is a really big part of that, so I want to applaud you all for your work in this area as well. So thanks.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the esteemed panel for joining us here today. We're very excited to present to you the report, and we hope you enjoy it.